Before I go into it, I want to share a little bit about me. So my name's David. I'm often referred to as DH because I'm never the first David at any company. And for me, I came to Webflow because of my love for playing, exploration, and visual programming. I believe Webflow is the amalgam of design and engineering kind of coming together. So I'll share a little bit about some of the challenges that we've encountered at Webflow, but also at previous companies I've been at too, where I've been able to see different levels of scale and growth for companies. And I don't want to just share only my opinion, but get expert insights on how people have experienced it as well. So before I get started, I want to ask a question. Have you ever found yourself asking, is it just our team? The other day, a button just came into our design system and it's 8 pixels off. It's not the 16 pixel border radius that we had. Is it just our team that has this problem? Or maybe half of your time is interviewing and bringing on new designers. And at some point, there's 5 designers that come in a week and you don't know any of them. Is it just our team? Or how about when you feel the designers you really loved working with have left and there's attrition and things just feel a little bit different? You've been there for a couple of years. Culture you feel has changed. Is it just our team? I'll tell you the answer right away. It's not only your team. We all feel this and we're all in this together. And this is what this talk is about, is talking about the universal challenges that all teams face. It's not just you. Before I go into the universal challenges, I want to define hypergrowth and scale a little bit because there's an actual definition of it. So hypergrowth is defined when your company is experiencing over 40% of a compound annual growth rate. That's a lot of acronyms. So roughly put, your team's almost doubling in size. So there's this hypergrowth stage of, as your team is small and scrappy, trying to find product market fit, you go on this upward roller coaster of being able to get to resource maturity and really be that large growing company. And I think one thing's important to know is scaling is not about scale. I'm not here to talk to you about what's it like to be on a 100 designer team. I've never been on one. What I'm here to tell you about is how do you navigate through a lot of quick change. And this affects big teams and small teams as well. So when we talk about scaling, we're talking about the velocity and the speed in which your team is growing. So for us at Webflow this year, we're expecting our team to grow about 125% by the end of the year. When I was at One Medical, we had a small but mighty team. And within the course of a few months, our team went from 4 to 14. And that might not sound like a lot, but that's 250% growth. To paint it another way, our team used to be so small that we used to do our offsites at Figma's office, our friends there. And then we continued to scale. So again, this is about velocity and the pace in which things change. So with that, I'd like to talk about some of the universal challenges that we encounter. So universal challenge 1, work priorities will change often. Have you ever been at work, whether you're a manager or an individual contributor, that all of a sudden new priorities change and you wonder, does leadership even know what they're doing? Or does anyone know what they're doing? Things are constantly changing. There is nobody available to do this work. I'm already so busy. Well, there's a reason for that. And I'll share a little bit of the reasoning. It's because when you're in that hypergrowth stage, what you have to prioritize is your customers in the form of new markets and also product priorities as well. Because when you were smaller, you had a much smaller group of customers to serve. And as that continues to expand, there's so many other things you need to prioritize. This is a good problem to have because it probably means the business is doing well and there's opportunity for you to serve even more customers. What happens though is new initiatives will arise and also your customer persona might change. Maybe you start with really technical designers, but now other people are starting to expand and use your product. You need to think about how to serve those needs. What can you do about it? You want to be flexible. You don't want to be rigid when you're planning for hypergrowth, because the moment you plan in about a few weeks or a month, priorities are likely to change. So you want to be able to create structure while allowing that flexibility. It's okay to incur debt. Organizational debt is a very real thing. And when you're moving so fast and have to focus on prioritizing customer needs and the product, things are going to get more inefficient at the business level, because there's going to be more people and more needs in that regard. And you're going to have to find moments to find blocks of time to pay them off. So what our design leadership team does at Webflow is we find mini offsites that we can do on a quarterly basis, where we gather and refactor all our documentation and processes. There's just so much going on. We're going to have to do hiring. We're going to have to do other things that take time. So make sure, identify where you can incur certain debt. Universal challenge number 2. You can't hire and onboard more designers fast enough. In any hypergrowth company, there's always a shortage of designers. And what's being asked of the designers already on the team is to interviewing so much that they don't even have time to do their own work. And then other organizations are scaling as well. So you need to consider that. So the reasoning, why does this happen? Is because as you're expanding to those potential markets and more features, you might need to spin up new teams. So a lot of the teams that the people you are hiring for, the team probably does not even exist yet. And there's not enough designers to go around to do the work. This is a great framework from the book Org Design for Design Orgs, is that you kind of fall in this infinite loop. If you don't hire enough designers, you're going to have to do all the work and you're going to burn out. So you don't want to fall behind on hiring. There's only one way out of this, and you'll have to hire your way out of it. Make sure you create an interview plan that's as repeatable as your design process. It should be treated the exact same way. So current designers or new ones coming on board can get onboarded, understand how to interview, and help with the hiring process. Hiring is a team effort. It's not just a hiring manager. Document the most important onboarding moments and assign a buddy, because I guarantee you your onboarding documentation is going to change. Each month, you might have new designers that they have to meet. You might have new processes or entirely new teams. Find those vital moments that is really sacred to onboarding and prioritize that. At Webflow, we have what's called user guides, which shares a little bit about how people like to collaborate. And now in people's onboarding, we ask them to build it in Webflow. We know this is important and sacred for us to be able to get people immersed in the product. So we want to prioritize that. Other things, assign a buddy and have them be your Sherpa for that, because documentation is going to change and evolve. Universal challenge number 3, your roles and responsibilities will shift. And it might not feel comfortable. It might be different responsibilities that you had that's not in the job description when you started. You might feel stretched so thin because as you're hiring for these new groups, you may be asked to do some of the work there. So now you're getting stretched in certain areas. And inevitably, it can feel scary that new leaders are going to come in and new senior team members are going to come in, and you're going to wonder about your own career growth. Is this stunting my growth? Am I still wanted here? There's so many people coming here. Like, where do I play a role in this? And again, this is all interconnected. The reasoning is due to that dynamics of the growth. You're going to need to be able to reprioritize what you focus on. When I started at Webflow, I was responsible for product design and brand design, but now we have an amazing brand design leader coming in. I'm able to focus my responsibilities in other areas. And that applies to everyone on the team, is that you may be needed for specific areas of work, and you have amazing new team members coming in that can help scale even further some of the areas you were originally responsible for. It's not a loss in responsibility, it's a collaboration. What can you do about this? Find that T-shape of the core delivery of your role of where you can maximize. Find out where you're being stretched thin and see who could take that on. Maybe it's a new team member or maybe it's a peer. Delegation is not just a manager responsibility, it's a team responsibility. Find those areas where you need to stretch in your role. And this doesn't mean you're not being asked to do something you didn't sign up for, but maybe you have to do more of it in order to even manifest like the scale that you want the team to be. So for example, hiring is probably the best example of that lever. You may not have been asked to interview as an IC, but now you're being asked to do more of that. Find where things stretch and identify what has to be deferred. Universal challenge number 4, team processes and rituals will constantly break. Have you ever been in a meeting with your design team and realized you have another meeting that's almost the exact same, with the exception of 1 or 2 people? Or have things been reviewed that you might not have seen before? Or the weekly coffee chats or the weekly cadences you have with team, people aren't showing up to anymore because everyone's so busy. The reason is when you're a much smaller team, you're more malleable and you can adjust schedules a lot more quickly. But when you have a much larger team, you have to think about the design for that scale. So one suggestion I always have is think about the meetings and rituals of what that full team is going to be, not the current team now. What is that team going to look like in a year? And start planning accordingly. So you make sure that the rituals and processes that people are accustomed to have a clear roadmap and they can evolve and change. Some things you can do. Conduct frequent share outs and demos so people can learn context. As more designers get onboarded, you're going to have less time to see what everyone's working on. Build out standard operating procedures too. So as someone starts, think about what do you wish you would have had or you would have known as you got started as a designer on this team. Focus on continuous improvement. We as designers are often perfectionists and we want everything to look exactly as desired. That's probably true about process as well. Knowing that processes and culture continue to break, embrace it. Identify how you can find those as opportunities to foster continuous improvement. At One Medical, we really fostered continuous improvement in the form of what we called a Kaizen. And it's really plan, do, check, act. And this could be in a daily cycle or in the week. So retroing frequently and understanding how to improve can help reduce the frustrations of things breaking because you're constantly iterating on your process and your team culture. Universal challenge number 5. This is a touchy one. It's the career growth traffic jam. This is a very real thing. Have you ever felt when you first started, you were so excited about all the senior designers that were in the room with you? And then there's another senior designer and another senior designer, and then a manager, and then a principal designer. And you're wondering, when is it my turn? When is the investment in my career growth? These are very real pains, frustrations, and challenges that scaling, especially scaling companies, struggle with. And I'll tell you why. Because as in the universal challenges preceding it, a lot of team growth is likely going to completely new teams and new initiatives. So what's important is to continue to staff that, to be able to move at that velocity in which you're hoping to target. The senior designer purgatory is real, but I think there's some reasons for that in hypergrowth. And also, when you invest in early career designers, you want to make sure there's time for them to be mentored, time to pair with them too. And at that high velocity, you'll have to consider how you'll set them up for success. One of the outcomes of this, if successful in hypergrowth, is that it will equalize at some point. And then you have a really great group and a leadership pipeline that you can foster. So what can you do? Make sure you're having development one-on-ones and that they're happening, and try and be as transparent as possible on career growth. When you're so busy with so many other things, these are the things that might get lost. So be intentional about making the time for that. And it's going to be an ongoing effort. Be realistic about the opportunity roadmap too. If you know how fast your team is going to scale, give people a sense of where things are going. Don't promise specific roles or promotions, but really identify areas where people can stretch, that they feel like they're growing and it's fair to like what they want to do for their core delivery. Universal challenge number 6, prioritizing the design North Star. I've heard this at a lot of companies, and we all know that seat at the table that design always talks about and wants to be at. It's crucial in strategy. However, when you're growing fast, there's a lot of work that needs to get done, and it is important work. So it may feel like design isn't involved in the company strategy. It might feel like you're just pixel pushers. You want to innovate more. And then all of a sudden, when you achieve some of those goals, people wonder what's next, and you haven't had time to think about the North Star and some blue sky exploration. And again, the reasoning is all intertwined together. We're focusing on so much work that needs to get done, and it's important work because it's delivering value to the customer. But what happens is then not enough people are thinking about that end-to-end experience, or you find hard time to talk to customers due to your bandwidth of the work you do. You have to foster both. And what you can do is build stretch goals in every single project you work on. It is in design's nature to push out of the bounds of scope and explore what is possible in order to build something even better. So as you're doing the important work, make sure there is time allocated to do that work, to be able to push, so everyone is aligned on it. Create a space to play and explore on vision. Though design is work and hard work, I believe it should be fun and playful. Make sure there's times for your designers to gather together, whether organized or self-organized, to have design labs, to have studio sessions, to really simply jam, or fig jam, if you will, on different ideas that could get prioritized on the roadmap. It's important for us to work in our bounds and constraints. However, we need to push it to explore the infinite possibilities of what your product and your company could be. And the last one, team morale and culture will be at risk. I don't think I need to talk about how people are feeling right now and the burnout being real. That's just another added factor to what people may feel as companies grow really fast. When is this chaos going to end? Is this fast scale going to end? And again, if you've been at a place that's moving fast long enough, you're going to see some of your best friends leave, and maybe they're pursuing other opportunities. Why is that? Is there something wrong with the company? Everyone blazes their own path. And some of the reasons is the culture of your team is going to change because you're adding more people and more perspectives. Not only your team, but other teams in the company as well. Burnout's going to be harder to recognize, especially in a remote environment, but also as the team continues to grow. So you want to make sure you're on the lookout for people to see how they're doing. And again, not everyone enjoys this fast scale. So there may be reasons that people are looking for something different. What can you do about it? What I recommend is, if your company doesn't do it already, find a way to get quantitative data on how people are feeling. So A product like Culture Amp is great to be able to get understanding on morale of how people are doing. And in this screenshot of some other company, you can see you can track areas that you can dig into, right? There's still the human aspect of it. You want to use this as a way to get data, to get a signal on things to look into. And when you think about culture, identify those sacred moments that are non-negotiable, for times for the team to gather and for design to have that time. So maybe it's an end of year celebration or semi-annual offsites. Make sure that those are by design and that they don't get forgotten, because you can't be successful in hyper growth if people are burned out and not motivated and not inspired. So you have to start with people. One thing we've done at Webflow is connecting with other design teams to support each other. Us and many other design companies such as Loom, Figma, and Lattice, we've had Ficas where the design teams gather together. There's nothing more special than the community of designers talking about the challenges you go through and how to navigate it, and just to have those honest conversations. So sometimes the support can also be outside of the walls of your company. And the most important thing is maintain the integrity of what makes your team special. How did you even get here in the first place? What are the things that you need to ensure is long lasting through hypergrowth, from your team culture, your values, and what you believe? I'll leave with some final thoughts. And just to recap real quick, I think a lot of times when you think about challenges, it may be at the surface level. But as designers, we want to get to the root cause. Really think about root cause analysis thinking of where's the pain, where are the challenges, and how do they connect? These 7 universal challenges are not separate. They're all interconnected. You can't isolate them, and they are holistic. So to recap, work priorities will always change, and that's normal. It's not, it's just based on the need, and things are dynamic. The entire company is trying to shift and identify what's the most important thing, and design will shift with it. Don't get behind on recruiting and hiring. It's the most important thing that you can work on. Your role and responsibility will fluctuate a little bit. Your team processes and rituals will constantly break. Find ways to gain continuous improvement and get ongoing feedback. Prioritize conversations about career growth with your manager. It's really crucial when the team is growing fast and it's feeling like there's not a window for growth. Talk about what does that look like on the other side when you achieve that scale. Prioritize innovation and make sure that design is thinking about that North Star. Nobody's going to tell you to do it in a time of high prioritization. You'll have to make time. Make time for that greatness. Your team will look very different than when you started. And I think the culture and morale is something that you need to make sure that you have a good pulse on, because it's the most important thing that is the foundation for all of this. The only constant in hypergrowth is constant change. You can't tell people change isn't going to happen. What you can do is prepare people for it, to be resilient, to not burn out. Scale doesn't mean hustle and grind. I truly believe no individual can out-hustle hypergrowth. You have to do it together. You have to be thoughtful about it. Like the design process, you plan, get feedback, iterate, and show up next week and try again. Prioritize hiring above all else. This is the one compound effect that will impact you in a negative way. So make sure that you're making enough time and the company's making enough time to foster hiring and prioritizing it. Build your organizations to be elastic. They can bend, and be malleable, but you don't want them to break. The flexibility of an elastic organization is very powerful as you're continuing to scale. So foster that flexibility. I'll leave with two quotes. I like to leave this one, and I share this for every talk because I feel like it's so spot on in many scenarios. So I'll close with this: is hypergrowth and scaling teams a good thing? It might sound terrible, but I think what's important is the journey and the experience that you feel going through that. You want to be thoughtful about it. It's not for everyone. There is nothing wrong with wanting to be a solo designer. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be part of a big company already. Nobody is forcing you to join a scaling startup. However, I can share through my experiences. I have all these vivid memories of every single person that was with me along in that journey as we went to face that hill of where we wanted to go as a company. And I really cherish those memories. And I'll leave with this quote, is that I think through resilience, you grow a lot. So maybe the hyper growth is our personal growth ourselves in this stage. So as the saying goes, may the flowers remind us why the rain was so necessary.